Open your mind.
Hello and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
Myself, Stephen George. Good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 24th of June 2018. Isn't the weather fantastic? No complaints.
None whatsoever.
Get the gardening done.
We should be outside.
Tidy all. We should. We should have an outside broadcast fan. Or put it in the back garden and have the barbecue going at the same time. We'll have to aim to do that for next year.
Absolutely.
Right, okay. Our guest on the show tonight is a chap called Ivor Cummins. So we're going to be bringing Ivor in a few minutes. But as usual, we have a few things to talk about, and we're going to find out what the communication channels are.
Yes, communication channels. Here we go.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Yes, thank you, Mary. The OYM chat room can be found at oymradio.com. You will see the links there for the chat room and also for all the other links, including the email, which is info@oymradio.com. If you want to send us in an email during the show or during the week just to say hi, let us know where you're tuning in from, or if you have anything to say, or maybe even a guest that you would like us to get on. That is the email address. 046 927 1212 is the magic phone number for the studio this evening. If you want to call in from outside the Republic of Ireland, it's going to be 00353 469 271212. We also have the Twitter as well. The link there can be found on the website. And also the chat room on peoplesinternetradio.com. And a big hi to everyone logged into both of the chat rooms. If you have any questions for our guests or comments this evening, that is the place to put those. And finally, we have the TuneIn Radio application. That's a free app for your mobile device or your PC or whatever, and you can listen to OYM 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Alan.
Brilliant, Steve. Right, okay. If you remember last week, we mentioned the fact that at this moment in time, we're not going to be promoting a digital currency. Now, it just so happened, the next day, I happened to come across a BBC programme called Rip Off Britain, which is on every now and again. And they were talking about digital currency, and they had people on saying how they were ripped off by fake digital currency companies and fake wallets. One guy took a loan out of £3,800, and another guy was scammed of £34,000. Now, we do feel that the digital currency is just another scam for the elites to retrieve you or take your money in all kinds of ways. Because at the end of it, if you think about it, right, you have physical money in your hand and you give it away for some digital currency which you don't really have in your hand anymore. And if the exchanges get hacked, or there's a third-party wallet which is hackable, or it's a hacker's program, then that's it. Your digital currency is gone. And if the exchange is hacked, then your money's gone also. So as we said last week, if it's not in your hand, you don't own it. Okay? So that's why we're really not going down the road of digital currencies. I'm sure there's hackers out there also hacking the system, but we've also heard that the cabal or the elites of you, whatever name you want to put on them, is just another scam to actually, for them to get money. So that's why we're not going down that road at this moment in time. I know we understand the benefits of it and how good it is and everything else. And in a fair system that works well, it's a great idea. But until we have a clean-up of the system and the certain powers to be out of the game, the best thing to do is to avoid digital currency. And that's just how we feel about it. Steve?
Yeah, some news in from RTE.ie, and it says decriminalize.
Are you okay? Have you got your right teeth in tonight?
Right, okay, save this for the outtakes. Decriminalization of cannabis is under consideration, according to the Taoiseach. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said that an expert group currently considering the decriminalization of cannabis is examining the system in jurisdictions in which cannabis has been decriminalized for recreational use. Early this week, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada will legalise the consumption and cultivation of the drug. The drug, it's a plant, from next October. Speaking at the British-Irish Council in Guernsey, Mr Varadkar said it is something that is under consideration. He said, we're conscious that Portugal has done it and has seen some success in moving it from a criminal justice matter to a health and addiction issue. And I'm very conscious, he said, that cannabis has been decriminalised in every state on the west coast of the United States. Colorado most recently, Canada, and the sky hasn't fallen in. So it's something that's just under consideration, he said. Mr. Radcliffe was also, I believe this week, was known to be down at the Body and Soul Festival in Ballinlough.
Oh, was he?
Yes, he was.
Did you see him? Oh,
no,
did anybody see him?
I don't know
Okay.
anyone seen him.
Okay,
Yeah, anyway.
That's interesting. So, as usual, Ireland is normally 30 years, 20 years behind everybody else, as usual. But we'll get there in the end. And thanks to people like Vera Toomey who were, protesting and demanding that medical cannabis was released for her child who was getting seizures. There's one thing to legalise cannabis for personal use if people want to smoke it all day. That's up to them. But we're more concerned regarding the medical cannabis rather than just the day-to-day use. Even if the medical cannabis was released, and where you could go to the doctor and get a prescription, that would be fantastic. And not synthetic cannabis, the proper stuff, obviously, because we don't want the synthetic cannabis for obvious reasons. Right, how's your week, Steve?
Yeah, my week has been fine. It's been a busy week, and as you mentioned at the top of the show, the weather has kind of improved here as well, so we're all kind of very lethargic. Well, I know I am anyway. And I am apologise in advance if I've done any faux pas or slip-ups or mispronunciations during the show, because I think I have sunstroke. Yeah, I believe I do. I was kind of sitting in the car today. My son was at an event today, so I was kind of sitting in the car, and I do believe I may have contracted sunstroke, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I actually was at a family gathering there yesterday, and I was speaking with an individual who shall remain nameless, but we were having the crack, as they say, and we were discussing, the ways of the world and whatnot, and he brought up something about the moon landing. And, the trips to space and he was just chatting away, so I was kind of going, nodding politely, yeah. And then he was saying about the sunset, and he says, no, there's a lovely sunset there. The sun is setting, but the sun has already set, and that's not actually the sunset that you're seeing there now. What that is, he said, it's an optical illusion of the, something to do with the curvature of the sphere. And I said, no, we're kind of going down the road here now, just very, very briefly, of kind of flat earth stuff. Now, yeah. I'm not saying it's flat or round or square or oblong. I don't know. I haven't travelled far enough to know. But I just said to him, how of the sphere? And he said, yeah. And I said, how do you know it's round? And his face changed. He looked at me and he went, what do you mean? Of course it's round. I said, no, how do you know? Have you travelled far enough away so you could actually look down at it? I don't need to, he says. I don't need to because I've seen the NASA photos and I went, okay, would you class yourself as open-minded or closed-minded? Oh, I'm very open-minded. I says, well, okay, entertain the thought for a moment, not just on the earth, but entertain that everything that you've been told could be a lie. And he looked at me. He says, what are you talking about? He says, are you one of these conspiracy theory nutjob, tinfoil hat wearing individuals? And I said, no. I said, but just entertain it. I said, how would you feel if you found that everything you've been told for the past, 25 years of your life has been a lie and you've been lied to? And he looked into himself for a moment and he says, but that's not possible. I know if I was being told lies. I said, no, how would you know? I said, people can be very creative and they can feed you a line over a long period of time and all of a sudden it's now your new belief system.
Yeah.
And he says, well, but we've seen photographs from the space station. I went, oh, I could doctor a photograph in Photoshop and tell you it's from anywhere you like.
Yeah.
And I said, you just don't know. So anyway, without going into too much detail, we had a long conversation after that where we bandied stuff back and forward. And by the end of, I'd say about possibly an hour later, he was, he claimed to be open-minded at the beginning of the conversation, but he was more open-minded at the end of it, and it's got to the stage where by the end of it, he was he was asking me stuff and he was questioning stuff and, well, what do you think about this? And I was going, well, I don't know. I said, all I know is that I don't know and that I know nothing. And I said, unless you've travelled, I said, just in relation to your sunset, I said, unless you've travelled 250,000 miles, I said, away from the earth, you don't know what you're looking at. I said, so don't believe everything you're told. And that's my moral of today.
Okay,
There
well
we go.
that's fair enough. And it's gas when people think they're open-minded, and then when you challenge their belief system and they realise that, oops, actually I'm not actually open-minded because I'm set in a belief system.
That's it.
And I'm not prepared to change. Yeah, okay, well done.
Yep. Another seed planted. Anyway, how's your week?
Yeah, not too bad. I did the same thing. Actually, I had a chat with a listener on Skype, and we had a good open-minded chat. And again, we were talking about belief systems as well. And I know the lady said, well, I don't have any belief systems. And I said, well, that's your belief system. The fact you don't have a belief system is your belief system. And that kind of, she had to think about that for a minute. Because we all have belief systems. We all believe in what we believe in today might be different. You know, we might believe in something different tomorrow, but we all believe in something, you know. So, and that's our belief system until it changes. Very quickly, before we bring our guest in, Ivor, I went down to Catherine Kabungu, who's the regressional therapist, and I had that session with her during the week. Now, she will be coming on the show in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about the session. Now, I didn't get, now this has nothing got to do with Katrina, but I didn't fully get regressed. I went into more of a meditative state, into kind of meditation, and I kind of just did some linking myself, and some information came through, and maybe I just need to relax more. Maybe that's the thing I need to do. But it was a good session. It was relaxing, and information did come through, which was good. But we're going to get Katrina on in a few weeks' time to talk about it, because she had some experiences herself with dealing with people and in therapy, which is very interesting. So we're going to talk about that as well. We'll mention that as well. But it was quite interesting. It was an interesting session. As I said, some information came through the meditation more so. But I wasn't fully regressed. But that's just me, I think. I just need to relax more. Take some happy pills maybe somewhere down the line.
Maybe meet up with Mr. Varadkar and get some of that wacky.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Make it legal. Right, okay, we're going to bring our guest in now, but before we do that, we're going to get Steve to read out his bio.
Yeah, so I've got Ivor Cummins bio here, so I just ask everyone to sit back and relax, because it's quite a large bio. Anyway, Ivor Cummins, he completed chemical engineering in 1990. He has spent over 25 years in corporate technical leadership and management positions, and was shortlisted in 2015 as one of the top 6 of 500 applicants for the Irish Chartered Engineer of the Year. Ivor's focus and speciality is leading teams in complex problem-solving scenarios. He has often led worldwide teams with over 60 to 70 engineers working on major technical issues. The largest of these involve product issues where hundreds of millions of dollars were in the balance. Several years ago, Ivor encountered a complex technical challenge in his personal life, receiving poor blood test results. He was unable to get solutions via the doctors he consulted. He thus embarked on an intense period of biochemical research into the science of human metabolism. Within 8 weeks, he had resolved and optimized all of his blood test metrics. Also, he had shed over 15 kilos of body fat with relative ease. In the following years, he continued his research on the many root causes of modern disease, from cholesterol through to insulin resistance, in order to help stem the tide of chronic disease in our modern population. He embarked on a personal mission to share the science and solutions. He began this process by giving corporate talks and releasing them on YouTube for the wider audience. He has since become a professional speaker of note, giving many public lectures and sharing interviews with worldwide health experts. Most notably, he was invited by the President of the British Association of Cardiovascular Prevention and Rehabilitation, the BACPR, to give a keynote talk on heart disease root causes at their annual conference in London last October. All Ivor's public lectures and interviews are available on his YouTube channel, where well over 1 million views have been recorded to date. We will put a link up on the chat rooms to Ivor's YouTube channel. His book on chronic disease, root causes and resolution strategies, co-authored with Denver Dr. Jeffrey Gerber, was released in the US and Canada in March 2018. It has already received around 150 reviews on Amazon, of which 97% are 5 stars. His blog and other content is also available on his website, thefatemperor.com, which we'll also put a link up on the chat room. From early 2018, Ivor has been fully funded by the Irish Heart Disease Awareness Charity, the IHDA. This fulfills their mission in enabling all middle-risk people access to the power of the coronary artery calcification scan, that's the CAC. He has thus ramped up his passion to help the people help themselves in a journey to health, weight loss and longevity. Ivor lives in Dublin with his wife and his 5 children.
Good evening, Ivor. How are you doing?
Good evening, Alan. How are you doing, Steve? That's a long one there, I'll have to say.
That's a long one.
That's a long bio, that is. But we're going to be.
It didn't seem so long when I scribbled it up, but there you go.
Yeah, we'll have to cut it down a bit. But listen, thanks a lot for coming on the show. We got your contact details from Pat Green, who was on the show there a few weeks ago. Pat Green, who's the leader of the DDI party, and he suggested giving you a call and getting you on. So thanks to Pat for that. Now, the situation, what I can see from your bio, Ivor, is that there's always something down the line that triggers people to start doing the research. Sometimes, you know, you're in your little bubble, right? You're in your little glass house and you're with your family or whatever, and everything's going fine and there's no reason to look outside until sometimes there's a medical issue or a death in the family or an eviction or a bank issue, and then people go, hang on a minute, what's this? This is not right. There's an injustice here and something's going on. I want to investigate it. And then all of a sudden we step outside the matrix and start looking at what's going on. And we realise actually what we're being told is not true. Now, by the sound of your bio, that seems to be what's happened to you. You went in obviously to get checked out, and you found out by doing your own research that actually what their tests that they've been doing were not accurate enough. Can you go into that first before we get talking about everything else?
Yeah, sure, Alan. Well, pretty much, not so much, I mean, I know you're talking earlier, a conspiracy, but in a sense it is a conspiracy that the blood tests that we commonly do, a lot of the doctors are not fully aware, shall we say, of the implications of those tests and what causes them to go bad. And that's one of the big problems that we're trying to address, myself and a worldwide network now of MDs, doctors, professors all over the world. But my initial experience was that I went in, I'm a highly technical guy, as you heard from the bio, it's been my whole life. And I went in, got standard blood tests, nothing special, and 3 of the measures were very, very high. Now, because I've worked with data and complex problems for nearly 30 years, I just glanced at the results with the doctor and I realized, wow, I am so outside the normal distribution for normal people. This is crazy. So I knew immediately there was some special cause going on, and that's what we call it when it's not just random. And there's something specific and serious going on, you get data that's really way outside the normal. You know, it's never a casual thing. There's something specific going on. So I very quickly interrogated the doctor, more so than the average guy maybe. And I asked the 2 questions that are very important when you are brought in to address a problem. I asked, what are the implications of these crazy values for health or longevity or disease? And the second question is, what are the root causes that would drive these numbers to go so bad? And I expected the doctor to give me the 2 answers, you know. Well, you know, with values these high, you might live 10 years less. And what causes this is A, B, C. But what happened was not that. I got very woolly answers, and I realized very quickly from decades of questioning people on technical matters, I realized the person is not sure. You know, they're not lying to me. They're not hiding anything. The person here who is an expert is just not sure. So I got a couple of pointers, but they were very weak. So what I did was I said, okay, I got 5 children. I know these values are serious because one of them was a liver enzyme, GGT, and I just knew liver enzymes should not be so far out. And the other one was serum ferritin, which is an iron loading in the blood. and I wasn't an expert, but I knew that very high iron was a problem. So I said, right, okay, so the doctor doesn't know. That's okay. I'll go to another doctor. So I went to another doctor who I know personally, very, very smart guy, and I went through it, and he didn't know much more. So then I began to get a little frustrated. So I said, okay, I went to a third person who's an extremely experienced professional, extremely intelligent, and I went through it, and I didn't get much more. So then I realized something fairly profound. Wow, there's these basic blood tests that can be miles out of whack. I know they're probably serious, but I better go and research them myself because the experts don't seem to know. And I was quite shocked with that. I just thought if this was the engineering world and you've got maybe 10 or 15 common blood tests, the experts will have a very good answer for any of those if they're miles out of whack. It sounds reasonable, right?
Yeah.
It should be. So I realized then there's something huge going on here because this doesn't make any sense. So I went and I got my corporate log on to ResearchGate and to PubMed, and I didn't go and look for books because the doctors have all the books, so I knew whatever's going on, I'm going to have to go back and research these measures right through the last 70 or 80 years of published peer-reviewed scientific papers, because that's what I do. I will go find the papers and I will do the root cause analysis. And within a couple of weeks, I answered both the questions. The first question, how serious are these? Well, they were very, very serious. A high GGT liver enzyme is one of the best measures of early mortality out there. Okay. And the second question was, what are the root causes? And I found out within a few weeks of intensive study that in my case, it was excessive carbohydrate in my diet. So refined carbohydrates, breads, sugars as well, and some other things. So I said, okay, I've got the root cause now. It's not certain, but I'm pretty sure because I do this for a living that that's the problem. So the next step is to remove all of the root cause issues, like the breads, the pastas, any of the sugars, fruit juices, all of the things that cause inflammation and drive up these markers. And I did that. I removed them. And in the following 6 to 8 weeks, I got 2 more blood tests, and they all came in dead center, and all my other blood tests improved. And I lost 15 kilos without much effort. And then I kind of knew I was correct. And then the question came, how did we arrive here? How do we end up with experts in the field not knowing really important fundamentals about what drives these chronic disease problems? And then I became obsessed with answering that question. So I went on to research for many years and built a network all over the world, and kind of got to the bio you see now, where I have a published book with a doctor and I speak all over the world on these things.
Brilliant. That's very interesting because we do programs and we've had doctors and nutritionists on the show talking about health issues and talking about obviously the food that we eat. And I mean, it's really processed food. It's not really food if you really look at it and you look into it. And we obviously try and educate people regarding the likes of the aspartame and the MSG and the fluoride in the water to avoid them. And obviously, try and improve your diet because what you put in is what you get out. And I know it's a cliche, but it's so true. It's so true. Now, obviously, I'm not surprised at your findings regarding the doctors because they literally spend probably half a day of understanding homeopathy and natural cures in their training, and the rest is all about drugs. Having worked in the pharmaceutical industry myself, once upon a time in the corporate world, I have a good understanding of how it works on that side. Now, obviously, the interest that I have, and the question I have is, you said you lost 5 kilos and you didn't have to, sorry?
15.
15 kilos, and which is fantastic. And we do eat the pizzas and the pastas and the meats and all stuff like that. What did you find out of the diet that you changed? I mean, what was your diet? What was your routine when you changed? Did you just say, from this day on, I'm going to be eating X, Y, and Z. Did you turn vegetarian? Did you turn vegan? Did you cut meats out? Or what did you do?
Right. Well, I discovered what the problem foods were, so I eliminated those and I let real healthy foods just backfill. So I didn't go trying to eat any magic foods. I certainly started eating a little more fish and sardines and things like that for the value they bring, but mainly I cut out the bad stuff and let good stuff just fill in the gap. So what I had been doing for many, many years, and I'd done triathlons and all kinds of fitness stuff as well over the years, but I was believing the current food pyramid guidelines. I was believing that the healthy whole grains, the whole grain breads and all this kind of stuff was healthy, and the fat and the fatty meats were unhealthy and they'd clog your arteries. So I kind of believed that stuff. In spite of me being a technical person, I believed it. Because why not? You just assume it must be right if everyone's saying it. I fell in that trap. So what I did is I stopped all the breads, the pastas, zero fruit juices. I used to drink quite a few of those. I realized they were a liver toxin in the amounts I was drinking. And I cut out all of the refined carbohydrates and most of the carbohydrates. I'd still eat, above ground vegetables, no problem. Broccoli, cauliflower, cruciferous vegetables, kale, all those vegetables which are dinner, they're fine. They're low sugar. They're not refined carbohydrate. They're fine. But what I really began to take my energy from was healthy Irish grass-fed fatty meats, more eggs, more fish, avocados, olives, all of the healthy real food, fatty and proteinous foods. I began to make my fuel for my machine. And that's what made the transformation. And people wonder, well, why did you lose weight? And it's not because magically when you take away carbohydrates, you magically lose weight. But when you eat real food, mainly fatty protein foods, your appetite comes under your absolute control. So I could not believe after a week or two that I just wasn't hungry anymore. I mean, all the breads I were eating and juices were causing blood sugar crashes a couple hours later and making me hungry and driving more and more eating. But when I switched to real foods, mainly fat and protein and less carbohydrate, suddenly my hunger came under my control. And that's a very powerful thing when that happens. You really feel it and you realize I only need to eat a couple of meals a day now and I feel perfectly fine and perfectly satisfied. So the weight just fell off.
Okay, and how does that work with, you're obviously a dad, you got 5 kids. How does that work? Because it's always hard when you're have a family, and the family are used to a certain routine and certain foods and certain dinners, and you know what kids are like. They normally like their chips and their chicken nuggets and stuff like that, and their pizzas. Did you adapt that for the rest of the family, or what's the situation there?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, Alan. Yeah, I didn't want to become a food Nazi, because I'm kind of a normal bloke, and you don't want to become like your kids think you're obsessed. But I was a bit obsessed. So what we did is we went the easy-ish route. We removed all the cereals and refined breads from the larder. And my wife actually is a classic Irish cooking person. There was always meat, veg, potatoes, and meat, veg, maybe with rice. So what we did is we began to back off on the potatoes and rice, and we made it meat, fish, or other stuff with vegetables, but without the carbohydrates like the potatoes so much. And then we began to do packed lunches for the kids for school, where you get a Tupperware tub and you put in all the nice stuff, like whether it's a sliced hard-boiled eggs or tomatoes or, meats, and kind of pull the bread back. And we took out all the cereals, all of that pure sugar, all of those breakfast cereals, complete junk. We took those out. So the kids kind of weren't overly happy with it, but, they adapt and they still sneak sweets and they still want to get their hands on sweet stuff because that's the way humans have evolved. If you come across sweet stuff as a human over the last few thousand years, you eat it fast as much as you can because it might mean survival, through a famine in the coming months in the winter. So we're wired to eat the bad stuff. because it used to confer survival, but now it just gives you obesity and diabetes, unfortunately, because there's an endless supply of it. But back to the kids, they largely just kind of got used to the new environment, and we still let them have sweets now and then and other stuff. We didn't become Nazis, but we kind of took the bad stuff out of the household, and it was just kind of gone, and they just kind of got used to it to an extent.
Well, this is I find the only way to solve the problem is to not buy the food and not bring it into the house. Because if it's in the house, it'll be taken and it'll be used. So, but that's the problem, because if your partner is into a certain food and she, say, complains and so, why don't you get some of that? Well, I don't want to get it because it's bad for your health and I don't want anybody else eating it. But I want to eat it, and you think, okay. And then if it comes in, then your children might say, okay, well, it's there now, well, we want to get some of that. And this is a dilemma that I'm sure we'll all be going through with food and have done over the years. Steve, you want to speak to Ivor?
Yeah, potatoes. I mean, hands up everybody who has potatoes with every meal.
Near enough.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like potatoes are like a staple of the Irish diet. I mean, my wife, no matter what she makes for dinner, there's potatoes with it. And you know, sometimes I've said it. She's not on the chat room, so she's not listening. But I've said a lot of times, why do you do potatoes with every meal? And she says, I don't know, but that's kind of the way we were brought up. That, you know, it was kind of whatever you were having, you know, it kind of it went with potatoes. And now, I mean, if you had to give us a top five, Ivor, just very briefly, if you had to give us a top five of the things that we should either A, cut out, or at least B, cut down on. I'm guessing the bread's in there and potatoes. I mean, would they be two of the five?
Yeah, the potatoes that's a great one, Steve, because that's very controversial. So potatoes, it even depends on what you do with them. Now, I agree with you. We have a cultural history of potatoes going back endless years.
Yeah.
And as a result, we just know that the dinner is, you know, your meat, veg, and your spuds. And that's a cultural thing. You know, if you had a culture of smoking, it'd be very hard to stop people smoking. But the thing is that meat and two veg, historically used to be the thing. It wasn't meat, veg, and rice. It wasn't meat, veg, and potatoes. Meat and two veg was always the classic, you know, in Europe. So potatoes, if you boil potatoes, they're not overly bad. If you bake them, it makes the sugar a lot more available and spikes your insulin more. And if you mash them and break them up and mix them with a bit of butter, it's particularly not good for insulin rises. So I think if you had potatoes and you were a very healthy person who'd always eaten real food and you ate potatoes during your life that were just maybe boiled a bit, there wouldn't be a problem. But the main issue we have now is it's published last year that around 2/3 of adult Americans over the age of 45 are now essentially diabetic, which means they're carb intolerant. They have a problem digesting carbohydrate without getting their blood sugars rising. So now in the modern world, Ireland is not a million miles behind. England is in a disastrous state as well. So when your population has now become kind of overweight and diabetic, they're now very sensitive to food like potatoes. So potatoes would not be too bad for a natural tribes living somewhere, but now we've got a population that's been damaged by modern foods. So people are more sensitive to them. So you got to be more careful. But potatoes are not top of the list. The top of the list are refined carbohydrates. So plant foods, carbohydrates, grains that have been mechanically processed to be very fine powders and remade into foods. And those ones explode in your gut and drive many hormones. I won't get into too much detail here, but they drive insulin rising and blood sugar. So the processed carbohydrates and processed foods are the worst.
Give us an idea of the products so we know what we're talking about.
Right. Well, any processed grains, so breads are a classic example, highly processed, mechanically abraded grains, you know, breads. Pastas, generally the modern pastas are pretty bad too. If they have a lot of egg protein in them, they might be not so bad. but a lot of the cheap pasta nowadays is not good. Most processed foods that you get in the supermarket, if you go around the outside of the supermarket, around 10% of the foods are real food. Like you've got eggs, you've got meats, you've got fish, you've got vegetables. That's all around the outside of the supermarket. But all in the middle of the supermarket now, most of the packet foods and processed foods contain refined grains, right? And they contain vegetable oils, industrial seed oils, which we were told to eat because they're heart healthy. And the combination of refined carbohydrates, refined grains, and vegetable oils together is a real recipe for long-term disastrous health. And most processed foods that we pick up, the sauces are all full of sugar now. Absolutely full of sugar, the ultimate refined carbohydrate. A lot of ready meals have refined carbohydrate and added vegetable oils and soy oil. And these are probably, if you want your list of 5, the very top is these processed ultra-refined foods, unfortunately, that have become the staple, and the cereals. I mean, 90% plus of all those breakfast cereals, they're just pure glucose sugar, right? Often with oils added in as well, man-made oils. So all of the cereals really are just a sugar fest. They're compared to a few eggs for breakfast, they're just a disaster.
What about porridge?
Porridge is not so bad because the oats in classic porridge, non-mechanically refined, are actually slow release of glucose into your system. And some of the food gets through your gut down to your lower gut and actually triggers some beneficial hormones. So porridge is not too bad. However, the caveat is important. Many modern porridges are now ultra-refined powders. They're more palatable and they are not good for you. So all of these powdered instant porridges, I don't know what percentage of the market they make up, but they've become very dominant. They are bad news. But if you take a classic Odlum's oatlets, you know, where it's all like kind of flaky and thick and glutinous when you put in the milk and water, you need to steep it, that's not nearly so bad.
What about, you say about having eggs. I assume you're probably talking about like a boiled egg as opposed to a fried egg.
I personally like boiled or poached eggs, but I do them anyway. When I do have breakfast, which is not very often these days, I usually only have 2 meals a day, sometimes 1, eggs is a staple. Eggs are, they talk about superfoods, and I was asked for an interview recently, can you tell me your favorite superfood? And people expect you to say fermented vegetables or some fancy herb from China, right?
Yeah.
But for me, egg is a superfood. It's mostly protein and fat, high-value proteins, tailored to give great nutrition to a human machine. Eggs are a superfood.
It's funny that, what about people who are lactose intolerant when it comes to dairy food, dairy products?
Yeah, well, that's okay. That doesn't include eggs, to my understanding. Yeah, that's milk and milk sugars. So there's 2 schools of thought with lactose intolerance. One is it's the milk sugars, that the lactose, which is milk sugar, that you're intolerant to it. So in those cases, you can get cheeses that are low in lactose, and butter, of course, is okay because it's mostly the fat. So that's a route.
Ivor, that has to be real butter, though, doesn't it? Not these fancy spreads, which are practically plastic.
The spreads are a disaster. I mean, poisonous plastic paste, I've heard them described as. The spreads with vegetable oils are industrially refined products which have no place in a human. No, I'm talking about real butter. And particularly Irish butter is great. If you go to America, you get this white-looking, anemic butter, and it hasn't got any of the nutrition that Irish grass-fed cattle butter has. So, yeah, Irish butter.
There might be an issue with that, Ivor, because there is an Irish butter over here, and it's actually made with the actual Irish water, which is fluoridated, and they did some testing a few years ago, and it was 50 times over the acceptable limit. So although the butter itself being natural might be good, you have to ask how was it made and what ingredients were used. And obviously it's like if they have certain fizzy drinks or certain kids drinks, and if they're produced over here in Ireland using Irish water, which is fluoridated, then you have to kind of ask the question. You have to look at how it's made.
Yeah, there are some questions there. Now, I've looked into the science of that to a certain extent. I think it's still an open question as to how bad it really is to have traces of fluoride in butter. And I'm not saying it's okay, and I'm not saying it's bad. I think that the science is not fully in yet. The fluoride in the water, taking in large amounts of fluoride, can cause kind of problems in other areas of the body, and it's an open question. We generally get bottled water anyway because it's so inexpensive now. You know, if you go to Tesco, you can get 12 litres for a couple of euro. So we generally just get the spring water.
Yeah, I normally use I normally go to Aldi. They have the rebranding of the water, which is Porridge. And basically, I rang up the bottling company in Shercock, and I asked them, and they said that it's fluoride free, and their water's fluoride free. Now, I did ask them to send me, because they said that on the label it should state that it's fluoride free, but I couldn't find it. So I asked them to send an image of the label over to me, and also the information stating categorically that there's no fluoride in the water, which they were very hesitant to send over to me. So I have to chase them up during the week and ask them. And because if they're, why should they hide that information if they should be promoting that information? But I know the Porridge water is a pH of 7.6 from source. And but according to them, it's fluoride free. So that's that's the water I get.
Yeah, they might be a little careful with the legalistic when someone's questioning them, and they get the sweats like any corporate. I guess there'll be some naturally occurring fluoride anyway, and they'll be probably agonizing over whether it's technically fluoride free. But I think those spring waters are taken from underground springs. Generally, they're not taken from the water system and then minerals thrown into them. I don't think they're allowed to do that. So there might be naturally occurring some level of fluoride, but nothing too heavy, I'm guessing.
Yeah, if people buy Celtic Pure, it's called, that's their own brand of water, and the bottling company is up in Shercock and Cavan. And I've spoken to them on a couple of occasions. But yeah, naturally occurring fluoride is fair enough, but not the actual chemical that they're pumping in since the 1960s.
Yeah, the hydrofluorosilicic acid.
Oh, you said that okay.
I did, yeah.
Your teeth is okay now, that's fine. Okay, so we're all on a downward spiral, Ivor, by the sound of things, with all the food that is out there. Now, Ivor, I don't know whether you've ever heard of a movie called Soylent Green, which was made in 1972, and what's his name?
Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston starred in it, and it's supposed to be a movie about the future, and it was dated, the future date was 2022, when food wasn't food, it was all processed. And if you haven't seen that movie, we recommend you go and watch it, because that kind of gives you an insight of them telling us ahead in advance from 1972 that our food is going to change. So the one thing we say to people also, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, when you go into a health food shop, or you go into the likes of Super Value or Tesco's, and they have their health section. Well, if that's their health section, what's in the food that's not in the health section?
Yeah, it's a fair question. Now, at the same time, in their non-health section, they have meat, fish, eggs, and all kinds of real food. But most of their non-health section, of course, is processed food with refined carbohydrates and vegetable oils. So, yeah, it's a fair point. But even the health section, I'd have to check each product, because they may have something in the health section that's good because it's got some, some amazing herb in it, or it's not got gluten. But what else is in it? And it might be just a whole pile of refined carb and junk.
This is it, and I totally agree with you. I've gone into the health section thinking, well, I'm going to get something healthy, and you pick up the ingredients, and it's eat this and eat that and eat this, and you think, but this is supposed to be the health section. Why are you putting all this crap into it?
Well, yeah, but if you get gluten-free breads in the health section, and the fact of the matter is, those things are junk food. I mean, they're just refined carbohydrate. They took gluten out. That's great. But, I mean, it's like taking out one problem from a cigarette and saying, hey, this is a healthy cigarette. what's left is still junk.
Yeah. I used to get the gluten-free bread at one time, and then I gave up getting it because there was E's in it and other chemicals. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to buy this anymore. Now, there was there's a Irish company that are producing Irish yogurts at the moment, and I was in SuperValu there last week, and I was wanting to get a few healthy yogurts, probiotic yogurts. And I picked up this yogurt, and it looked good. It said GM-free, GMO-free. I thought, happy days. And then it had the dreaded words on it, no added sugar. And when something says no added sugar, you kind of go, does that mean it has aspartame in it? And of course, I turned it around, looked at the back of the ingredients, and they had aspartame in it. You know, I mean, you know.
Well, yeah, you see, you got to be commercially competitive, and if people have now been trained, as they have over the last 50 years, to look for sweet, you kind of have to give it to them, and that's one of the problems. But if you get full-fat Greek yogurt, I think Tesco have a very low-priced brand of full-fat Greek yogurt, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't have much in it, only real yogurt. So I guess you got to go and check. But the problem in the supermarket now, whatever about aspartame or sweeteners, is the 95% of the yogurt aisle is low-fat yogurt. It's incredible. You know, you really need to, if you're going to eat yogurt, you eat full-fat yogurt with no sweeteners, like the real food we used to get. But most of the supermarket shelf in America is even worse. I went in America looking for yogurt recently, and it's like finding full-fat yogurt is nearly impossible.
It is amazing, and when you go in, and more of the supermarkets are told or conditioned to believe that you need to go for the low fat or the no added sugar and everything else. And when you go in, you kind of say, well, there's nothing I can choose in here that I want, because it's all got to do with either the toothpaste has fluoride, or the bread is processed, or the gluten-free bread has E numbers in it, you know. And you have to, it's kind of wading through all the food, trying to find the holy grail, trying to find the needle in the haystack of the food that you can eat. So I think maybe it's a case, and we have to be careful of not so much vegetables but fruit, because the GMO fruit they're seedless. So, you know, like seedless grapes, well, they're GMO because, you know, grapes don't grow without seeds. So we have to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, and the GMO is another whole area. I primarily focus on the fundamentals of food as to, you know, has it got good nutrition, and has it not got refined carbohydrate and not got vegetable oils? But you're right, beyond that, then you're into the whole GMO thing. The fruit is also a bit of a problem in the sense that we used to eat fruit in Northern Europe in the summer and autumn, and it fattened us up for the winter, and it was a really important food to get you through the winter. But now winter never comes, and we were never designed to eat fruit all year long. So they talk about 5 a day, fruit and vegetables. Well, yeah, vegetables are okay, but all of this fruit, when did that happen? Well, that happened with modern transport. So we get fruit all the time, and it's not evolutionary appropriate, you know. So I take berry fruits, organic berry fruits, which are low in sugar and more like the fruit from the last few thousand years, but not the modern bred for sweetness, big juicy apples and oranges, which are full of fructose. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay, so you have to be careful with the fruit because of the sugar content and the natural fructose that's in the fruit.
And it's been bred to have more of that to make it more attractive and eat more, right? When we cleaned up the house in terms of the bad foods, the kids went crazy for the fruit bowl because, like I said, we're evolutionary programmed to take when we can sweet things. Sweet things in nature are almost never toxic. They're safe foods when they're sweet, almost always. And if you get hold of sweetness, you take it when you can. You know, it may get you through a later period of famine. But nowadays, when the fruit bowls are full and the larder's full of pure glucose, like refined breads, you know, it's not too surprising that everyone has gone to hell.
Yeah, no, it's frightening. As I say, trying to find the needle in a haystack when it comes to food and knowing what's the right stuff. And everybody will kind of have an opinion, and I'm sure you've come across people where you might have had a debate, and they go, no, that food is fine, it's okay. And then you have to kind of do the research and look into it. Have you come across anybody that would have argued with you or disagreed with what you were saying about the food?
Yeah, well, the main people who argue with you are people with close ties to industry, to be honest. There's two groups. One massive group are researchers who believe that fat was bad, and they cannot turn around now and say that natural fatty foods are okay. It's the modern foods that are the problem, because they've built careers over 50 years telling people to be afraid of eggs and meat and other things and fats and butter, and it's simply inconceivable for them to admit they were wrong. So professional pride, in the vast majority of researchers, they'll fight with you. And then there's the people who industry have bought. I mean, there's an organization called ILSI, the International Life Sciences Institute, that was set up with all the major food manufacturers back in the 90s, I think in Washington. And that's got a lot of academics and researchers on board. And those guys will fight with you really hard because they're there to defend processed food at all costs. So they'll fight with you not just because of professional pride or what they believe or belief systems you mentioned earlier. They'll fight because they're engaged with the system and, you know, they're on the inside. Yeah. And they're expected to fight. So yeah, the other people who will argue are vegetarians or particularly vegans. And myself, my worldwide network of researchers would always say you can do a vegetarian healthy diet if it's a lower carb diet and you don't eat all the breads and the crap, and you make sure you get your supplements of B12 and what you usually would get from meats. You know, you can make it work. Yeah, so we don't like to argue with the vegetarians, but a lot of them will be quite militant, especially the vegans, and they love the idea that cholesterol was bad and fat was bad because it made them more right. And now that the world is turning and we're realizing that natural grass-fed meat products and fatty foods are actually very healthy if eaten without the bad carb, they don't like to let go the old ideas of bad cholesterol and bad fats because those old ideas made them look more correct. So I can understand that, and that's okay. We try not to fight too much with them, you know.
Yeah, no, well, funny enough, Steve is a vegetarian, but I have to say...
It's not contagious.
It's not contagious. But I have to say, in all the time we've known each other, we've never had the issue where Steve would try and, push his ideas of vegetarianism onto me. Although I did try being a vegetarian for 2 weeks, and the food was terrible, but then I was cooking it, so that's probably why. But we did have a doctor on the show, and it's a very interesting interview. If you have time, we might send you over the link. Well, we'll send you over the link to it, and you can have a listen. And I'm just trying to find out her name now. Steve, can you just have a look to see if you can track down her name? But basically what she said was she had MS, and she was a doctor, obviously, and she wanted to find out why was she suffering from MS. So she went off and she did all the research on the food and everything else, and she's actually back to about 95% health because she changed her diet and she gave her body what I wanted. Now, she was a vegetarian, and she said for 20 years, and she said she went back to eat meat because she realized that your body needed the proteins and enzymes from the meat.
Yeah, this is the challenge. Very, very kind of clued in vegetarians can maintain very good health on a vegetarian regime. Now, really, they need to take B12 and some other supplements to make sure they stay healthy for the long term. But if you have a chronic disease, you got to be extra careful. I think it's like we said earlier, if 2/3 of your adult population is essentially diabetic, and this is the elephant in the room, we basically have a diabetes catastrophe in the world today. For the 12% who are declared full diabetic, there's another 40 or 50% generally in Western countries that are fundamentally diabetic but not diagnosed. But anyway, back to the lady. Yeah, if you have a chronic disease condition, ideally you need to focus on getting the best possible nutrition. And often that will include, some of the meat products that we evolved on. Not always, but often. If you have an issue, you got to make sure your nutrition is brought to the ultimate level. And it's a little harder to do that on vegetarian regime, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the doctor's name was Dr. Terry Wallace. And
Terry Wallace.
Terry Wallace, yeah. And
Wallace protocol. Oh yes, I know of her, yes.
Yeah, and she's been on the show twice, and she told us all about her protocol and what happened to her and her fighting back. And it was very interesting that she said that she was a vegetarian and she went back to eat meat because she realised that she was missing proteins and enzymes that she needed from the meat. Now, as you say, it's each to their own and what way do you want to do it. But the one thing she said about being a vegetarian is that if you are carrying any weight, then she said that chances are you're just eating the wrong food. Even though you're a vegetarian, you're eating processed vegetarian food. And she said that's what you need to change. And of course, what we do and why probably with men we get, everything goes down to the belly is because that's where the food is stored that doesn't kind of agree with us. So it's the body puts it there.
Well, actually, I wanted to actually ask Ivor to expand on that, because in the video that I watched today, which obviously anyone who's listening can be found on Ivor's website, thefatemperor.com, in the video section, is where he actually goes into a lot of the science behind he talks about the fructose, the insulin resistance, and that little belly that we have down there. And maybe we can get into that as well.
Yeah, well, that's an important one. So the fat that you build in your middle area, often it's referred to as visceral fat because it's in your organs, around your viscera. So it's behind your rib cage, in around your organs is visceral fat, and that really means you've eaten the wrong food for some time. It's a very, very bad sign, and it correlates very closely to increased mortality. Whereas some people get fat all over, and that's called subcutaneous fat under the skin. And that generally is just a reservoir of storing energy. So if you can eat the right foods, you may get a little fat, but it'll be safe fat all around your body and your buttocks and your thighs. It's simply batteries. It's just storage for a rainy day. But when you eat the wrong foods and become insulin resistant and drive your insulin levels up by eating sugary, refined carbs and vegetable oils over time, then you begin to develop the visceral fat inside around your organs. And that's a sign that you're heading for the wall or for a surprise heart attack. So sadly, tragically, I work on behalf of the IHDA, Irish Heart Disease Awareness, ihda.ie. And our main focus is to try and save the millions of non-obese, non-smoking people who appear to be not fat, but they're harboring visceral fat inside and they're insulin resistant. And when those guys in their 50s or gals get a sudden heart attack, everyone goes, wow, they didn't smoke, they weren't fat. It must be genetics. It's not genetics. In the overwhelming majority of cases, they were highly insulin resistant and never knew it, and they had fat in and around their organs that would have shown them. But the key thing, or the key message we have is, why measure the bloods? You can measure your blood pressure, you can measure cholesterol, all these kind of blood measures. They'll give you a rough idea if you've got a problem, but it's very rough. But what you really need is the calcification scan. So those people I spoke of, the millions of people exposed to heart attacks who do not appear obese, if they go in, the ones at risk, they get a simple 5-minute scan. It's around €200. And that scan will see the calcium in the arteries and will tell you you're at massive risk when all your bloods might have looked okay. And sure enough, those people, if you look deeper and took a biopsy from their internal organs, you'd see the visceral fat in there as well.
Yeah, and say I watched that video, and I have to say it was frightening. It was very educational, but it was very frightening as well. And especially when you were talking about the scale where people will go into the GP, they'll get the blood test done for the cholesterol, and then the doctor will kind of go, okay, I think was it the Framingham scale or Framingham thing?
Framingham, yeah.
Framingham, sorry. And they kind of go, oh yeah, you're at risk or you're not at risk. But then when they take it a step further, as you said, in in the video when you push and you get you go for the test and then you go for the CDC test, and then that really gives you a kind of a 3D image of what's going on. And a lot of, again, like what was also said in that, which I found fascinating, was that I think you said that the arteries rupture, and that's pretty much what caused the heart attack. They kind of they break down. I did not know that.
Can I just jump in there regarding this problem, Ivor? We've come across this before, and one of the things that we were recommended, and we've talked about this on the show, is a product called Arginine. And basically, I've heard fantastic stories about this. One chap in particular, he was supposed to be, they were going to fit a stent in for him, or stent. Is it stent? Stent.
Yeah.
They were going to fit a stent in, and he went on the Arginine. And when he went back to get tested, and they were going to check his arteries, they said, you don't need it. It went down from probably 70% down to 40-odd%, and the doctor said, no, you don't need it. Because what we were told anyway is years ago with the vegetables used to have a thing called nitric oxide. And it used to kind of clear the body and clear the arteries and everything else. But because of modern farming and everything today, the vegetables don't have that anymore. So we need to have that, and that basically helps clear the blockages in the arteries. Now, I don't know whether you've come across this or if you have any.
Oh, yeah. So NO, nitric oxide, is a crucial component in your arterial health. So your arteries actually release nitric oxide, and it causes vasodilation. You know, your arteries relax and expand, and it contributes to your arterial health. And it will counteract some of the challenges that we have with our modern food. So if you want to encourage nitric oxide and not suppress it, a lot of it is what I said earlier. You know, sugars and refined carbohydrates are going to end up through many mechanisms reducing your nitric oxide. Lack of sun exposure, lack of vitamin D will reduce your nitric oxide, because the sun on our skin releases nitric oxide, causes your arteries to dilate and get healthier. So there's many different things you can do to increase nitric oxide production and improve your artery health, no question. L-arginine is one of the precursors, or one of the components that helps to make nitric oxide, or it's part of that process. So taking extra L-arginine can be helpful. Now, I generally try and remove the problems through real food and not eating bad foods that cause problems with nitric oxide, and by getting sun exposure or UV exposure from lamps, or getting vitamin D from fish and vitamin D rich foods. I kind of go more the natural way rather than taking supplements. But in fairness, L-arginine, yes, will contribute and be helpful. Yeah. So it's just another way to help a little with this problem of nitric oxide.
Yeah, we've heard some great reports with it, and people saying who've taken it, and some great feedback. So just something for people to bear in mind. Now, we have a few questions come in from our listeners, so I'm going to pass you off to Steve, and Steve's going to go through them questions with you.
Well, in relation to the vitamin D, the obvious first question is, how much exposure? I mean, is it enough to go out and say 15, 20 minutes, or do you have to be out there all day?
It's like the statistician always says, it depends. It depends on your skin type. So if you are black-skinned, you will get a lot of sun to produce a certain amount of vitamin D. And if you are white-skinned, a lot less will produce the same amount of vitamin D. So I would see it as never get burnt, but always get as much sun as you can, but without getting burnt. And that's the easiest rule of thumb, because it's when you get burnt that you cause oxidative stress and inflammatory damage in your skin that can lead to future problems. So I would always say get as much healthy sun exposure as you can without actually getting burnt. And that will be probably close enough to the ideal. But the nominal guideline for a white-skinned person is 15, 20 minutes with a lot of body exposure, you know, in the middle of the day is enough to get a lot of vitamin D. And that's true. And you'll find that 15 or 20 minutes you won't really get burnt. So it'll be the same as my rule.
Yeah, and I mean, with that 15 and 20 minutes, obviously that's just out in the sun, 15, 20 minutes, without covering yourself in sunscreen, because
no.
Yeah, okay, well, once people know that as well, because we've heard some bad things about sunscreen.
Yeah, sunscreen will stop pretty much all vitamin D production, so you're wasting your time. Now, in fairness, I'm sallow-skinned. I will go out probably for 2 full hours, fully exposed in the middle of the day, and I will not burn. Because I'm sallow-skinned and I have a tan. But the other thing people should know, and there's an emerging science on this which is fascinating, and it's popping up all over the world. If you eat the right foods and you don't eat polyunsaturated vegetable oils and refined carbs, your tolerance for the sun increases hugely. So this is anecdotal. There's not peer-reviewed published papers on this yet, but I think it's coming. So the resistance to burning and tolerance to the sun seems to be massively increased if you stop eating inflammatory foods. And there are scientific mechanisms for it as well, in terms of your skin cells and whether or not they have inflammatory polyunsaturated molecules in them or not. So it's just another thing to keep in mind, that you can expand your ability to enjoy the sun if you don't eat the bad things.
Okay, good advice. Just in relation to the vitamin D, okay, let's say for argument's sake, well, we're spoiled at the moment because the sun is shining and it's going to be here for the next week. But for those times when the sun is not shining, you did say UV lamps. Is there? Are they okay? Are they safe? And what about vitamin D supplements?
Yeah, now they're good questions. So I have a concern that supplements, because there's massive links between low vitamin D and disease and early death. They're truly massive. You say, wow, is vitamin D magic? But the problem is that if you have inflammatory issues in your body, your vitamin D level will often go down. So it might not be the lack of D that caused the disease. The disease caused your D to go really low. So I would rather get the healthy sun or the UV exposure that we were evolutionary used to than trying to take lots of supplements, ideally.
Yeah.
But if you're low on vitamin D, the supplements are easy and they'll certainly address deficiencies. I got a lamp from Sperti Corporation in the US. It was designed and developed by the discoverer of vitamin D, Professor Michael Hollick, and he's done human trials on it, and it's absolutely FDA covered. It's a lamp that gives you vitamin D production, but it's all been validated. So I use that lamp during the winter rather than supplements, but it's expensive and people might not want to do that. So maybe supplements in the winter to keep you from being deficient, and healthy sun exposure in the summer where possible.
Can I just make a quick point there? Aspartame is also FDA approved.
Well, the aspartame is an interesting. I didn't dig in much into aspartame, but it's a very controversial area. The sugar industry funded, I believe, quite a lot of anti-aspartame stuff back in the 70s because it was a threat to their business. And then the business is now like aspartame because it's a low sugar alternative. So there's all these different players who have kind of queered the pitch on the science, and now it's very murky. It's very hard to call how bad it is. Or
well, it's actually, the research has been done, and it's linked to 97 different illnesses, and actually has a chemical a change in your body that forms formaldehyde. And we know what that is, preservative. There's a great YouTube video out there called Sweet Misery, and it's about a girl that suffered MS symptoms from taking Diet Coke. She thought she was doing the right thing, and she went and did the research regarding aspartame. And if you look at the actual history and who was involved and everything else, then you kind of go, and experts are on there as well. There are experts being interviewed saying about the dangers, and people saying that they got brain tumours thinking they were doing well, taking products with the aspartame. And even through the approval process for aspartame, that was rejected because the rats who they were testing the aspartame on were getting tumours as well. It's a long story.
It is, yeah, and I know Rumsfeld was involved, would you believe, with the Iraq War. He was up to his neck in that, so it's just very murky.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'd avoid sweetened beverages with artificial sweeteners as well as sugar. And ideally, you'll drink water or maybe milk or cream and just not. Stevia seems to be one of the more acceptable natural sweeteners, and erythritol is a sugar alcohol that is not metabolized by the body. It kind of just passes through you. So erythritol is another good sweetener. But yeah, I think stevia erythritol is probably a safer bet.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a study on the aspartame, and we could go into that, but we don't have the time. But we do have questions here from our listeners. So, Steve, over to you.
Yes, just very quickly, because I know we're going to be asked on the chat room. You did say the Sporty Corporation for the UV lamp. Is that SPURTY?
ERTI.
ERTI, okay.
Yeah, it's around €500, I think, to import one from the States. It's quite expensive.
Okay.
But, I mean, if you could throw one in a suitcase because you happen to be over there anyway, it'd probably help a lot.
Okay. Graham was wondering, do you have documented data on the mineral depletion of soils in Ireland and the UK over the last 30 years? And also, are you aware of chemtrails or geoengineering compromising soil potential?
The latter one there with GMOs and chemtrails, I haven't really got into, I'll be honest with that. In depletion of the soils, I think one of the major issues naturally is magnesium depletion.
Yeah.
So I think maybe 70 to 80% of people now, it's estimated, they're even not sure because the blood measure doesn't tell you, are magnesium deficient. Yeah. And magnesium is used in around 300 reactions in the body. It's incredible when you research this. Magnesium is at every turn. And it's probably a huge underlying problem that's not recognized. And while the calcium in the soil, there's plenty of it, the magnesium tends to get depleted with modern methods. So nuts like Brazil nuts and trees with deep roots often bring up magnesium, but a lot of foods are lower on magnesium now than they were. So we buy in my house half kilogram tubs of magnesium citrate from the UK from a pharma company, and we mix the powder in. It's tasteless with stews, with bolognese sauce, and the whole family gets magnesium quietly without knowing it. So I think it's really important. That's a big one. Another one that's a problem is iodine. So iodine is coming out now as being a major lacking in a lot of the world's surface. And a lack of iodine could predispose towards a lot of modern diseases. So I think iodine, you can get sea kelp and other sources of iodine. And interestingly, one of the controversies about fluoridation is fluoride is an antagonist to iodine. So fluoridation may cause you some iodine problems even if you're getting enough. So I think iodine is another good one to be thinking of. Yeah. And potassium. We're probably not getting enough potassium either. And if you move to an ancestral, healthy, low-carb diet, you might get some muscle cramps because modern foods might be a bit low on potassium. So that's another important mineral or salt to get into your diet.
Definitely. They're the actual three that were mentioned by Clive DeCarl, another guest of ours who's an expert in that. And he said the same thing. Magnesium was at the top of the list. Iodine definitely, and potassium he mentioned as well, because we asked him for the top 5 and he gave us the 3, and he said to obviously get the wet Celtic sea salt, get the sea salt because that's high in magnesium. So when you're having your dinner, get the wet, not the Himalayan salt because that's dry, you get the wet, because salt is naturally wet and the companies dry it out. But yeah, okay, let's pop over to the questions and we'll get through these. Steve.
Okay, another question that came up earlier on from Joan when you spoke about the bread. Joan says, what about spelt bread? Is that okay?
So spelt bread is less bad. Low tar cigarettes maybe versus Carols. I used to smoke Carols when I was a young person. But yeah, to be honest, these breads are refined carbohydrates and they excite GIP hormone in your upper gut and they drive insulin release, and they're just not good foods, especially when you mix them with fatty foods. So it's not ideal, but the spelt bread has lower amylopectin A, the real sugary kind of super glucose, and I think it's lower gluten. So these older wheat varieties are less bad. To be honest, it's better off weaning yourself off breads. And like I said earlier, instead of a sandwich, get a Tupperware pot, put in delicious real food, and enjoy it with a fork. But spelt bread is not as bad. And I think William Wheatbelly Davis, he has some great lectures on YouTube about the problems with wheat, and in the last 40 years, how they've developed wheat to be dwarf wheat and to be full of gluten and amylopectin A and glucose. So wheat's gotten worse. So spelt is not as bad.
Okay. And what about the likes of crackers and these, the diet people go mad for these
cream crackers
and the biscuits, the alternatives to bread.
Crackots and stuff like that.
All that kind of stuff, yeah.
All ultra-refined wheat. There's no good will come from that. But I think Ryvita, I'm not 100% sure, but occasionally when we get crackers, the Ryvita is non-wheat, it's rye fiber, and it's not so refined, I believe. So the Ryvita crackers might be the less bad option there.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Steve?
Yeah, Lynn says I may just kill myself and be done with it.
Yeah, be quicker.
No, don't do that, Lynn. Don't do that. Well, from what I seen on the video, I know I'm going back to this video that I watched on your website today. It did say that the damage that's being done, like by the stuff that we're taking in, that unfortunately that you may feel healthy today and you may look healthy, but this damage, it's not like it's going to hit you like a train. It's done slowly over, I think you say a couple of decades in the video, but by the time it's diagnosed then, is it too late to make the changes then? Let's say it's diagnosed, the damage has been diagnosed, but before you actually have a heart attack. Because I know you did say that Dr. Gerber, that he was kind of I think he said he was at risk, but then he made changes and he was able to kind of go back down to the other end of the scale. Like for people who are listening to the show now and they think they may be at risk, can they make the changes now, and is it enough?
Absolutely, and that's the important message of hope. So I give a couple of quick examples, but the science is clear on this. My the person I work for now, David Bobbitt, who spent a few $1 million, pure philanthropy, no profit involved. He runs the ihda.ie, and he wants to get the message out because he knows, as I know, that you can manage all of the problems once you wake up. So someone who gets a high score in the calcification scan, the orthodox treatment is maybe a couple of stents, but stents don't prolong life. This is proven in trials in the last 12 years. They relieve some symptoms, they don't prolong life. So what you really need to do is do kind of what I've been saying and a lot more, like in our book, Eat Rich, Live Long, explains them all. But you can take a high score with massive disease like David. David had a 908 score, which is the worst 1% for a 52-year-old, with a massive risk of a heart attack in the following 10 years. And he now has stopped his calcification by vitamin D, low-carb diet, sun exposure, magnesium, and all the stuff we mentioned. So you can stop the progression of this progressive disease when you take action. So your risk when you stop calcification rising, your risk drops down similar to someone who had no score in the first place. I have a friend, Ron Culbertson, who had multiple heart attacks and got to the point where he could hardly walk 100 yards. He has done everything we've been talking about. He now cycles 50-mile bike rides, and he has dropped all medications. Wow. Many people I know, same story. So the body has an enormous ability to repair itself, but the imperative is you must stop poisoning the body with what caused the disease in the first place. It's root cause.
That makes sense. You have to give the body the tools so it can heal itself.
Absolutely. And if you stop what causes the disease dead, within weeks and months, you will feel so much better and your risk will plummet. And the other thing is, it's not just the heart attacks or the cancers and all the other chronic diseases driven mainly by the modern food supply, but also other factors. There's also mental acuity and well-being and energy. So the transformation when I switched to this diet was stunning. I lost the weight fine, But now what I do before I do public speaking events or major meetings and stressful events, I usually don't eat for 24 hours in advance of an event. And what I actually do is I go into a state of ketosis. But essentially, you can run off your body fat when you're eating the right foods, and your mental clarity increases, your energy, your feeling of wellness. So I know that listener said, oh, I might as well, whatever. It sounds terrible to drop these bad foods. But what people don't realize is it's not just you live a bit longer, but your remaining 30 years, every day of them is going to be better. And that's a huge thing to play for.
Well, this is the thing. I think we all look at, okay, we all know we're getting older, but you don't want to end up with some long-term illness that is going to drag on for 10 or 20 years.
Exactly. And diabetes is the poster child for our modern food supply. I mean, amputations, retinopathy, loss of sight, heart attack. Most heart attacks are undiagnosed diabetes. Diabetes is enormous, like I said earlier on. But you've got Alzheimer's disease, which is now called type 3 diabetes, and it's an insulin resistance in the brain. It just manifests differently than classic diabetes. They're calling Parkinson's, beginning to call it type 4 diabetes, because it goes back to similar root causes. So heart attacks, diabetes, Alzheimer's, now Parkinson's, many of the cancers are intimately related to hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance. So it's not to make this too simple, but there's a common soil hypothesis of disease that all of the chronic diseases relate back in some way to what we're talking about today. So when you make the switch and you fix your insulin dynamics and you fix all the other things, you suddenly get a much lower risk for a whole range of terrible diseases, and you feel way better, and you've way more energy. And I mean, it's just, you get so much for bang for the buck by giving up this crap food that people don't realize that. They think, well, I give up this crap food and I enjoy that crap food, and what do I get? Well, the answer, like in No Country for Old Men, is what have I got to gain in the famous sequence? Everything. Yeah, everything.
Totally. Okay, we've got more questions for you there, Steve.
Yeah, Graham said he's going to be interested, Ivor, to hear your guest's insight on cannabis oil and also liposomal vitamin C for reducing oxidative stress.
Yeah, now the cannabis oil I haven't got into, and that's been a conscious choice. I'm just so busy with my research and worldwide travel. I have not touched that subject, so I'll have to admit I haven't gone there. From what I hear from people who have gone there are physiological benefits. It hasn't got many downsides. It'll alleviate some symptoms. Why not? But that's not my research.
Yeah, the general consensus is our body is a cannabinoidal system. Or they have cannabinoids, and what we've heard is that when your body's out of balance, that needs to be rebalanced. And what the CBD, won't mention the THC. But what the CBD does is brings in that balance to your body. And obviously in California, where you have these people like Granny smokes pot, and they're smoking away, and they're saying the health has never been as good. So when you have examples, and of course you have people like Vera Toomey, who gets the cannabis oil medicine for her child who's having 40 seizures a day, and that stops the seizures dead. There has to be something in it.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, I'm very free market, and if there's something there that can help a lot of people, and there's no particular downside, I would say, well, I would not be towards too much regulation. Now, the thing is, if Leah Varadkar, who's very much an establishment figure, is considering it, that'll tell you, because if guys like Leo are considering this, it'll tell you there's some pretty solid evidence behind it, because they would not touch it with a barge pole if there was no evidence. And I haven't gotten into it myself. It's not my area, but I'd say absolutely. The people who have are the people to talk to. On the liposomal vitamin C is a controversial one. If you're deficient in vitamin C, absolutely, scurvy and your arteries will rot. And there's much science around vitamin C is important. And there's also some interesting things that the vitamin C you buy in the store is not actually real vitamin C. It's only the outer shell of the large molecule, the antioxidant outer shell. So there's some controversy as to what is real vitamin C, but I think in those vitamin C trials, they would use the real product, I'm guessing. Unfortunately, I haven't got too deep into it. I don't think it's a magic solution, and I went looking into it a couple of years ago, but I depend totally on all my knowledge on published peer-reviewed literature, simply because unless it's published in a paper and I can see the data, it's hard for me to judge. When I did go looking for vitamin C around 2 years ago, I went through a little phase of looking into it. I found it hard to get published scientific papers that I could judge. Now, I'm not sure, were they not there, or, I'm usually good at rooting out papers, even 60 years old. So I just had the challenge that I couldn't find data to get my hands on to judge it properly myself. So I'm not too sure about it.
Well, you have to kind of keep an open mind, because without going down the conspiracy route, but it's not in the interest of the pharmaceutical industry to have natural products being available where people can heal themselves, because then they lose customers on patients. So, I mean, that's the logic. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the bottom line. It's the profit. It's business. That's what it is.
I agree with that, absolutely. And business, when people think that, but surely that wouldn't happen. Well, they've never worked in a corporate structure like I have. Business comes first every time. Now, you don't want to get caught. You don't want to cause a problem for your corporation. But otherwise, you'll bend every rule you can. Yeah. So the low-carb diet has had an orchestrated, sustained campaign against it for decades now, since Atkins. Probably for that reason, that it threatens food industry and it threatens pharma, because all the disease that's caused by high refined foods are huge profit centers. So of course people need to fight against it. The vitamin C I'm just not as well up on, really, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was some shenanigans going on there, I guess.
Well, we've heard stories of people being administered intravenous vitamin C, and it's actually brought them back to life. Not someone brought them back to life, but cured them.
There was one published case history I did get that was interesting, and it was kind of exactly that. I think it was in Germany, and they had a guy who was on death's door with, I think it was actually a massive systemic infection.
That was in New Zealand. Yeah.
It was in New Zealand, yeah. And I remember finding that and thinking, okay, I'm a kind of mathematical probability guy, and I know it's possible that was coincidence, but I remember my interest was piqued because just from the way the paper was laid out professionally, it was a real case. I found it very interesting, that one. And I wish they'd done a lot more of that, and then we'd know. Yeah. I mean, but I guess there's not a lot of people who will fund studies on something that's not patented. So we'll find it hard to get the published science because no one's really interested in paying for it. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we have more questions for you there, Ivor. Steve.
Well, where we go? Duncan says vitamin space C is better than vitamin C. He said than ascorbic acid, the man-made. Yeah. That's it. Ascorbic acid, the vitamin C molecule is fairly complex, and ascorbic acid is the shell that surrounds the molecule and protects the molecule of vitamin C from oxidation itself. But the ascorbic acid that they give you as vitamin C, there's a lot of feeling that that's not really the active molecule, and we wrote about it in the book. I just did a chapter on supplements and vitamins and minerals, and we did a couple of pages on vitamin C. And that was one of the key points to highlight, that when you get vitamin C, you're not really getting the vitamin C molecule. So it's very questionable as to whether you may see results or not, because, you know, it's only a piece of the molecule, and arguably it's not the most active component. So that's a challenge. But I believe you can buy real vitamin C. My wife, Eilish, actually gets it somewhere. That's the full molecule. I can't remember the name. Okay, Steve. Yeah, well, as Alan mentioned earlier, Clive de Carl, we know that his website there, well, what used to be his business there, ancientpurity.com, we know they have a large variety of vitamins and minerals and other good little trinkets over there as well. So and we could probably urge people maybe to have a look at Clive's site there just to see if you can get the proper vitamin C over there. But yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of stuff over here that you kind of get, supposed supplements and all that. And as you say, the good stuff is not in them. They're almost sold under false pretenses, as if, you know, we're promoting health, but we're not really promoting health. You know, we're giving you this vitamin C or whatever it may be to make you think that you're getting the proper supplements. But in reality, you're not really. But anyway, Pete, you know, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, myself and Dr. Gerber tend to focus, even through the vitamins, minerals and supplements chapter, tend to focus on trying to target natural foods that are rich with rather than supplements. Now, magnesium, potassium and iodine can be a challenge to get in the foods, and that's where we say, okay, particularly some of the minerals that are just minerals, you know, get the powder, mix it in with your food, why not? But some of the more complex molecules, ideally you'd get them from natural foods rich in those things, and then there's no real questions about it, you know, ideally.
And what about the likes of, we actually only spoke about this last week, what about the likes of as an example, the likes of spirulina and things like that? Would you recommend those?
Jesus, you got me there. Spirulina, it rings a bell, but...
It's like one of these powders that you like you mentioned. It is a powder. You can mix it with water.
It's like an algae.
It's green. Algae. It's green.
Green algae. Yeah.
Yeah, it rings a bell. Yeah, I don't specialize so much in these kind of supplement kind of sphere, except for some of the core things. I mean, what are the active components, I guess, that they're claiming? Is it iodine and like sea kelp or?
We'd have to get it. If you hold on, I'll actually go and get it. While Steve goes through the other questions for you.
You're going to get it's in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, it may be. I'm not too close to that now, to be quite honest. But again, if they had the active ingredients, maybe they'd all be great things.
Yeah. Well, it says in it here that spirulina represents a biomass of cyanobacteria that can be consumed by humans and other animals. It says in it the saturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat, no cholesterol, vitamin A, it says 11%, vitamin C 16%, calcium 12%, iron 158%, vitamin D, no vitamin B12, 48% magnesium, and 20% vitamin B6. Now that's what it says. That's kind of that's a generic thing. Now Alan actually has the packet in front of him.
Yeah, the packet says high in fibre, high in protein, high in vitamin E and B complex, high in calcium, iron and zinc, low in sugar.
Oh, zinc's no harm, because zinc can be another one people can be low in. But look, there's a few good things in there, but yeah, I don't know. The cyanobacteria I've come across before, but again, didn't see a whole lot of science on it, so it's hard to make a call. It could be. Here's
an issue that we kind of have talked about, myself and Steve, and it's a bit of a concern that a lot of the time when we order products, they get sent over from the UK because we can't get them over here in Ireland, or else if you do get them in Ireland, they've been shipped over from the UK anyway. And when a product or a package comes through customs, they obviously have to do a scan or an X-ray on it to make sure that there's nothing dangerous in it. But the problem is that kind of X-ray scan is using radiation. And then you have to kind of scratch your head and have to think about it and go, well, is that radiation from the scanner actually affecting the food as it goes through?
Yeah, well, from what I know, I wouldn't expect a major effect on the food, because the molecules are usually quite robust. And a few molecules that get an electron knocked off here and there, it shouldn't make too much difference. But you can never say never on anything. It wouldn't be a major worry of mine, though, or even radiation on the human body, to be quite honest, in generic scans, I wouldn't worry about once you're not doing them all the time. But I mean, it could be, but again, I haven't researched that area of irradiation of food and downstream effects. But usually it's the more complex organisms, like biological organisms, like animals and humans, where radiation causes DNA damage and stuff. But usually, like foodstuffs, they're pretty robust to it, and the radiation levels are very low in those scanners, and they're very brief. I wouldn't guess so, but I haven't researched it, so I couldn't say.
Okay, no problem. We've more questions for you there, Steve.
Yes, we do. It's from the PIR chat room, and a comment says, I think nettles are high in vitamin C. John says the young shoots are high in vitamin C. And what about sulfur? Do you have an opinion on sulfur?
Oh, sulfur is an underrated element. Sulfation of cholesterol and, links to, there's a lady, her name escapes me now, who's an MIT professor. Her name escapes me, who's talked about cholesterol sulfate being crucial and the sulfation of cholesterol and all the mechanisms as to why. So I think sulfur is one of those forgotten or overlooked elements that are important in the human body. A friend of mine, Dr. Ted Naiman, says the human body is the most complex chemistry set in the universe, and you need all of these components to make it work optimally. And I think sulfur could very well be an underrated one. My knowledge is that onions often are high in sulfur, and I eat a lot of onions, but I don't supplement. I just, again, like I said earlier, I target foods that generally contain the elements, and I shove them all into the system.
Are they fried onions, or do you fry them or just eat them raw?
Usually raw. I slice onions, and I remember my uncle smoked 40 a day his whole life. He's now 82.
He smoked 40 onions a day?
Oh, no. He used to eat onions like apples when he was young.
All right.
And he did a lot of very good things without knowing any science. He always ate the fat off the bacon. He always ate a high-fat diet. He never liked cakes or processed food or sugary things. And he used to eat loads of onions and garlic. And not through science or trying to live longer, he just happened to make all the right dietary choices. He never believed the cholesterol rubbish, and he never believed that real food like eggs was bad. So he ate all the real foods, and he didn't eat the processed foods. And he also happened to love onions and eat tons of those. So I don't know. That could be partly why he managed 40 players a day for 62 years, I think.
Wow. And
still in there.
Did he, if he ate onions like apples, did he have a lot of friends?
Well, he got a wife and he had 5 kids, and he had a 58-year marriage, I think.
Oh, so right, that's good.
He did okay, but I think that was when he was younger. That was one of the stories about him. So it was more an anecdote, but it was true. He used to love onions, but I eat them raw. I chop them up and I put them on burger meat, Irish grass-fed burger meat in the barbecue. I lather it in onions. I do like them as well, and I know that they're bringing in sulfur, apparently.
Very good. Okay, and I actually was looking at something, funny enough, I came across something during the week regarding onions and hair growth, and using onions for hair growth.
What, rub it into your head?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Is that the smell?
Yeah, there you go,
I was wondering what the smell was.
As I say, your hair will look great, but you'll have no friends.
Yeah, well, I can't. Unfortunately, my hair is long gone, as the listeners will see from the picture if you post it.
Yeah, that's the three of us, Ivor. We're there as well, myself and Steve. Right, so we have about 7-8 minutes left. So what we want to do is just kind of sum up what we talked about today and give us some good news. Let's quick fire some solutions to the listeners and tell them what they need to be doing.
Right, okay. So in summary, top of the list, remove the ultra-processed modern foods in as much as you can, particularly carbohydrates. I mean, if you process protein and fat, it doesn't change a whole lot. But if you process carbohydrates, it goes from being kind of okay to being really, really bad. So remove the processed carbohydrates, the breads, the refined carbohydrates, breakfast cereals. Orange juice is pure sugar, essentially. So you get some vitamin C, but get it from the whole fruit. Remove all these simple carbohydrates and the complex carbohydrates, like the breads. They turn into simple carbohydrates in your mouth with amylase hormone or enzyme. So get rid of those. Get rid of the vegetable oils. right? The vegetable oils have a major questionable history. You know, the soy oil and all those vegetable oils. Have olive oil or coconut oil or natural cold-pressed oils if you want to have them on your salad. Eat nutrient-dense whole foods. So meat, fish, eggs, olives, avocados, high fat with protein, nutrient-dense foods. So everything you put in your mouth, say, is this bringing in nutrients and value as well as energy? Or is this just bringing in energy with no value and probably going to cause me a problem? Then vitamin D, get healthy sun exposure for nitric oxide and many other photochemicals released in your skin when you can, or a lamp, or top up with supplements. Magnesium, potassium we mentioned, very crucial. They allow your extraordinarily complex chemistry set to run properly, right? And eat a low carb, low processed carb, high healthy fat, proteinous diet of real foods. If you do all of those things, you can turn around a high calcium score and stop it increasing, generally. Now, you might have a special problem like heavy metal contamination or lead exposure or other things, but for most people, if you did all that and then a bit more maybe with some other supplements, you can, like David Bobbitt, my employer, you can actually stop a calcium score increasing and regain your health and collapse your risk for chronic disease and feel great. Add resistance training. You don't need to go running marathons. The best training is if you do squats, press-ups, lifts. You can do it in your living room, 20 minutes, 3 times a week. You can even watch television. So press your muscles to failure, meaning you do press-ups till you can't do any more, or squats. And that actually teaches your muscles to build new mitochondria and to enhance your muscle mass, which will allow you to be much healthier, especially as you get older. So I'm kind of just reeling off now a lot of our prescription in Eat Rich, Live Long, our book, which goes through it all. But if you just did these things, you know, you could change your future life, lose weight, feel great, be way more active, and enjoy life a lot more. The payoff is way bigger than the crap food you give up.
I think the problem is for a lot of people as well is a limited budget. Going in, and this is the trouble. You know, we've said this before, it's cheaper to eat unhealthy than to eat healthy. It's more expensive to eat healthy.
I'm delighted you made that point, Alan, because that is very true, but there's a twist in it. So I know it's not for everyone, but the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet are organ meats, and they cost nothing. Now, you may need to learn how to cook them to make them appetizing, like liver and kidney, but that's superfood, and it costs nothing. They nearly give it away. Eggs, because they were unfairly blamed for cholesterol, which is complete bullshit, right? Eggs are actually not that cheap. They come with huge nutrients and a lot of energy for not much money. Let me think, what are the other foods? If you take, lean meat, the premium mince in Tesco is €10 for nearly a kilogram, 2 pounds, right? That's not that expensive, really. But right beside it is the higher fat, non-lean mince, and that's healthier. And that's €4 for a kilogram of premium meat. So I think, yes, the junk foods they have made so cheap, it's scary. I mean, refined wheat now per kilogram can be as low as 40 or 50 cents. And that's from the farm all the way through the process and including the profit margin for the supermarket. So it is, and the cereals and all this junk. But there are lots of real foods I mentioned there that can be very cheap. If you start a low carb, high fat diet, you will eat less naturally, and you can target foods that are full of nutrients, and if you're clever, they don't have to be expensive.
Tell me something very quickly, last question. People, I like having a banana in the morning, because I know they say it contains potassium, and some people go, oh yeah, you're not going to get any benefit from a potassium in a banana because it's the wrong type of potassium or something. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It might not be so bioavailable, but I couldn't answer that straight off. I thought the potassium in the banana you would get the benefit of. But the banana, again, is a very sugary fruit, and in Northern Europe, we did not grow up on bananas 1,000 years ago, to be quite honest. Now, if you eat greener bananas, they're less bad in terms of sugariness. When they go very ripe, they get very sugary and they convert over. So I'd eat them greener. And potassium, I'm not 100% sure on that. Maybe it's not bioavailable or it's trapped in the matrix and it doesn't really get into your body. But again, potassium is so cheap. I mean, 0.5 kilogram bags on eBay from England, 500 gram bags are around €20 delivered, and that will give you and your family potassium for months just by mixing it in with your food. So I wouldn't worry too much about potassium.
Okay, and very quickly, another last question, just jump in there. Rice cakes.
Much ado about nothing. I mean, just refined carbohydrate. If you take the rice, I have papers and studies on this, and a researcher friend, Gabor Dolci, has some great ones, a guy from Hungary. They have the insulin curves for brown rice, white rice, and then when they grind it. And the brown rice and the white rice are not much different. The insulin rise is what it is.
Now, this is rice cakes.
I know, but, exactly. Yeah. But when they have ground rice into powder, the insulin rise is much, much higher, and it's a much worse food. Now, I don't know how they make rice cakes, but I presume it's how they make all the other refined carbs. They grind the rice into powder, and then they put it back together, and it's in a much, much worse form for your body than it was when it was in the grain.
Wow. Well, there you go. Okay, that's a question from Lynn there. Ivor, thanks a lot for coming on the show. We definitely have to do a part 2, and we'll have to catch up with you, because this is information that is just gold dust for our listeners and for everybody to realise that the food that we're being sold is not good for us, and we need to kind of, especially as we're getting older, we're all getting older, you know, and we need to start watching what we're eating. Our bodies can't produce the vitamins and the enzymes that it could do when we were younger. So we need to supplement them, and what we need to be doing is actually eating the good stuff to do that. But a big thank you for coming on the show. It's much, much appreciated. I'm going to pass you off to Steve. Steve's going to get all your contact information and where people can find you. Steve.
Yeah, Ivor, it's been absolutely fantastic. A lot of lovely positive comments on both of the chat rooms there. Thanking you for giving us your time and giving us all this information. We do have the links I have posted up throughout the show for the website, thefatemperor.com. We've also links up there to the book recommendation, which is Eat Rich, Live Long. We have a link to that up there also. And I do urge people, have a look at your video in the one where you talk about the heart disease and the insulin resistance. It is on the website. Any of the links or any other books that you want to just kind of promote there very quickly?
Yeah, I'll just say, thanks, Dave. I'll just say one more thing. If people Google Widowmaker, CAC, 2 separate words, they'll hit a viewing of the Widowmaker movie, which we now have translated into 12 languages, but not Irish, but it's in English. And that's the $2 million movie that David Bobbitt got made to try and save people from heart disease and explain all about calcification and stents. So Widowmaker, CAC, Google it under videos and you'll hit a free viewing there. And I recommend everyone watch that movie. Less than an hour long.
Brilliant stuff. That's fantastic. Okay, Ivor, thanks again for coming on to OYM. Just stay with us there for a minute. We're just going off to a musical break and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com and peoplesinternetradio.com.
Yeah, Dougie, that was for you. We did look up Alan's old box of 45s, and that's the only one he has, unfortunately. Yeah, some great information there from Ivor. He will pop back on again at a later date just to give us an update. Thefatemperor.com, for those not on the chat room, is the website there, so do check it out. There's a lot of great information, and the videos, unfortunately the videos will frighten the bejesus out of you, as it did me, but you know, it's I suppose it's better to get a wake-up call before you have the heart attack. You know, look at the videos and kind of ask the question: is that me? Do I tick any of those boxes? And if it is, make the changes now, because obviously you will live long and prosper.
Definitely. One of the things I actually did yesterday, funny enough, the weather was great. So I took off the shoes and the socks, and I just walked around the back garden, grounding myself.
Excellent.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think, with the weather the way it is, I think everybody should do it. Just go out the back garden for 10 or 20 minutes, whatever, and just walk around. Or just sit down on the chair and just let your feet touch the ground and do some grounding. We do talk an awful lot about products being expensive and we can't afford it, we don't have the money. But there are things that you can do that don't cost anything, and grounding is one of them. And I have to say, it was great weather just walking around, So it's just something that we'd recommend you do. Now, next week's guest, we have Walt Silva and Nancy Hopkins on. Walt was on the show before. We did a half interview with him. 45-minute interview with him, and he sent over a device which is apparently a energy saver, a power saver, and it does a few other things. And I actually have it on my mains cable on the house at the moment, and I'm going to see how we get on in 2 months' time when the bill comes back in. But Walt and Nancy are going to come back on, and it's going to be a cracking show, because when we had Walt on, there was loads of questions on the chat and loads of information, great information, and that's why we said we had to get Walt and Nancy back on. Nancy obviously knows about all this stuff as well, and so Walt and Nancy complement each other. So it's going to be a cracking show next week. You don't want to miss it. And if you have any questions, obviously when we do the live show, obviously it means that you can ask questions to the guests when they're on. If you listen to the show on the podcast, obviously you can't ask questions. So that's the great thing when you listen to the live show, because you can interact, you can jump on the chat room, you can communicate with all the other listeners as well who are listening to the show, and you can ask questions as well on the live show. So, all the benefits why you should listen to the live show. But sometimes I know with time zones and everything else, some people can't do it, and you have to have to tune into the podcast. So that's going to be interesting with Walt, Silva and Nancy next week. That's going to be interesting. What have we got planned for the week?
Well, if the weather's going to be like what they're saying on the weather forecast, then obviously I'm going to be in work during the week, but I will be making sure, or do my best to do as Ivor suggested, and get it 15 to 20 minutes of sunshine. Now, I probably won't be going to the extreme that Ivor did. So he said kind of full exposure. If I was to go full exposure, it wouldn't be pretty.
No, that goes for two of us.
Yeah. So no, I mean it makes perfect sense. I mean, when you think about it, we talk about how bad things are and what we can do and how expensive the right food is. But you're right. I mean, get out, get in the garden this week, get grounded. Do a bit of gardening, I suppose, and take your top off. Or your bottoms. take something off and get a bit of sun exposure. It's free, and for 15-20 minutes it could be very beneficial.
Definitely. Do you have a message that you have to read out there for the show, for Monday's show, I think?
Yes. Yes, it says this week. This is for PIR, and it says this week it is our pleasure to welcome our fan Dabby Dozy Paul, also known as Cotty, or Are You Addressing Me? That's on the People's Internet Radio chat. Not so long ago, a regular host on PIR and someone we have all learned from. Cotty has shared his journey with us in various ways and has continued on a solutions-focused path. We will meander around such topics as water, natural solutions to health and well-being, dandelions, bees. It's been a while since we caught up with Paul, one we are all looking forward to. I'm not sure that Fairport or I will get a word in, knew that our Graham has embedded himself on the Monday night show. So just in case we have an announcement to make, tune in to hear it. Okay, so that's going to be on People's Internet Radio on Monday. And I believe the show is called Thank Fairport. It's Monday. And if you go to peoplesinternetradio.com, you will see on the left-hand side, you will see the links, and it will tell you all the different days of the week and when the shows are on. So TFI Meandering Monday, 9 p.m. till late. There we go. Plug done.
Plug done. So that's really what's on the cards for next week for us, and that's what's happening on PIR. No news this end. Yvonne is still in jail, by the way. The lady that was contempt of court because she didn't want to give up her house and her kids, make herself and the kids homeless. She's still in jail, and they won't release her. And this is over 50 days now she's been in jail. It's just getting ridiculous now. Obviously Tony Rochford is still in jail, and there's a couple of other people who are in there and they shouldn't be in there, and it's just disgraceful the way the system is being run and being abused by the whole judicial system and the politicians. I know I always say it on the show, I don't know why people vote for these people. I really don't know why they keep voting for these parasites, and that's my own opinion, that I think they're parasites because that's what they are. The politicians don't do anything for you. They never have done. They never will. Why do we keep voting them in? We just don't vote. Basically, you have a choice. I know you have all the parties, but you have another option on that list, and the option is don't vote. That's just my take on it anyway. So anyway, that's the news for me. I'm not going to be I'm going to be looking into the health stuff that Ivor said tonight, and we're going to be looking at ancient purities. And the one thing I do want to get is the Celtic sea salt, the wet Celtic sea salt for the magnesium. I think that's going to be very important. But the vitamin C, Clive de Carl obviously said that as well. I think that's important. Get the vitamin C. He said he puts it in a bottle of water and puts a spoonful in and just takes that. And if it's the good stuff that has the full molecule rather than just the outside shell, that would be pretty good. So we'll see anyway. But it's all down to pricing, isn't it? It's always down to money, whether you have the money or not to buy it. And that's the problem. There's always a cost. Even that calcification or that test that Ivor said that takes 5 minutes but costs 200 quid.
Yeah, the CAC test, yeah. I
mean, who's 200 quid to do something like that, really? You know, it gets expensive, you know. Maybe things will happen where we can have the finances to be able to offer these tests for free. You know, in the ideal world, that would be where we're going, and maybe down the line, maybe if the cabal are closed down and the banking system is changed around and funding does become available, maybe that's something we can do and offer something like that for free for people. That would be the utopian world anyway. Right, for myself, anyway, Alan James, take it easy, have a good week, stay safe. If you have any information that's of interest, send it over to us and we'll have a look at that, and we'll catch you next week. Bye bye.
Okay, and last words from myself there. We're going to sever the stream now. Thanks to Ivor for giving us all that great information this evening. We're going to hand over to People's Internet Radio. I'm not sure exactly who's up next, but I'm sure it'll be a great show anyway. We're going to do it all again in a week's time. So thanks to everyone who joined us on the chat room tonight. You're more than welcome. And you could have been outside in the sun, you know, enjoying what was left of the beautiful day we had today, but you didn't. You chose to spend it with us, and we are eternally grateful. So thanks. We'll do it all again next week. So until then, take care. Bye bye.
Open your mind.